that fucking song! Just shut the fuck up!
Hello there guys, it's Math Dominus, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Batman. Now when I first heard of this movie, I was slightly concerned because for one, the main lead was Robert Pattinson, and for two, the movie is unconnected to the DC Extended Universe, and lately the DC Extended Universe has been in this kind of sort of unconnected phase, where all the movies are standalone, but they don't really hint at or even build up to a larger universe. But as the trailers came by, I became slightly more optimistic for this movie, and now that it's out, I can officially say this is probably the best Batman movie ever made. Now, of course, the original Tim Burton movies will always have a special place in my heart, and The Dark Knight easily being one of the best movies ever made. The Batman, however, it feels the most Batman movie out of all of them. You feel me? Like, it's the most comic book accurate and more in spirit with what Batman is supposed to be, this dark and brooding yet optimistic superhero when compared to the other Batman movies that came before. And it's well accomplished with the cinematography and just the shots of Gotham. Gotham really feels like this crime-ridden, dirty city. It almost reminds me of the Gotham that was in the Joker movie, but without the trash, obviously. And it's all accompanied with this dark tone and serious atmosphere. It almost has hints of a noir genre type of a movie. Hell, even Batman starts monologuing at the beginning like he's some sort of private detective like in those noir films. Speaking of Batman, this movie makes Batman the main character. Now, obviously, every other Batman movie has Batman as the main character, but what I'm talking about is making him a compelling protagonist. That's not to say that every other Batman before was bad, it's just that he's not the most interesting character when compared to the villains of previous movies. Like, everybody wants to see Joker, everybody wants to see Penguin, everybody wants to see the villains that Batman fights, rather than Batman himself as a character, because he's just the all-around good guy. But here, they actually gave him a sort of character arc that makes him a much more compelling Batman than any other previous live-action Batman. I'm sorry to kind of diss on those other previous Batman movies, but in this movie, he genuinely feels like he's the main character. He is the main star that we all came here to see. But just because Batman's the most interesting character in the entire movie, given how he's the protagonist, that doesn't mean that there aren't any other characters that I won't mention, like the Riddler. He's genuinely scary. Like, he's got this serial killer vibe to him, and with the actor's portrayal, he acts insane, and he acts insane really well. Like, I genuinely believed this person is mentally disturbed, not helped by his backstory, but I won't spoil that. Colin Farrell's the Penguin is also pretty good, and he can actually be genuinely funny sometimes, and honestly, I did not believe that Colin Farrell was the Penguin. Like, Colin Farrell's this handsome man, and now he's turned into this one ugly motherfucker. Oh boy, let's just say they did a good job with the prosthetics and makeup on Colin Farrell, because I genuinely did not recognize him, and I actually believed he was the character of the Penguin. He even walked like a penguin at one point in the movie, which was really funny. Now, when it comes to Selena Kyle, she's not a bad character. I enjoyed her, but she was kind of like my least favorite of the costumed villains and superheroes that showed up in this movie. She was just, I mean, she's an interesting character, and she's pretty likable sometimes, but sometimes she's just kind of boring and doesn't really interest me all that much. Also, John Turturro's in this movie, and oh boy, long as the days pass since he was underneath the enemy's scrotum, because this man can act. He can genuinely play this intimidating crime mafia boss guy with a bit of personality and charm to him, but obviously still an intimidating and scary mafia boss type of guy. Aside from Riddler, he might actually be my second favorite villain that showed up in this movie. And here I'm talking just about Batman and the villains he fights. Now, there are some side characters that I would like to mention, like Andy Serkis playing as Alfred. That's honestly good casting right there. Andy Serkis is always great whenever he's in. He does a good job playing as the mentor figure to Batman, but he's not in the movie as often as I would like him to be. He's only in it for like 2 or 3 scenes with Bruce, and he's just kind of not important, but hey, it's alright, it's alright. Once again, the character of James Gordon shows up, but this time he's a lieutenant rather than a commissioner, which is a nice detail because, you know, this was obviously in Batman's early years, but hey, he still found a cop that he can trust and work with. Now, for the most part here, I'm talking about the cinematography, the tone of the movie, how serious it is, and the characters are all great, but the story itself, oh boy, it's pretty good. For the first time, this is a Batman movie that actually feels like it's a detective movie. Batman has always been known as the world's greatest detective, but for the most part, that's not his most shining aspect in the previous movies. Here, however, the detective side of things is the most interesting part. Sure, there's a lot of action, it is a superhero movie after all, but it's the detective stuff, all the riddles and all the clues, and what you're going to predict next. It's what makes the movie so intriguing and immersive. Like, the riddles that the Riddler gives out, they actually feel like really good, well thought out riddles, and not something like a third grader would come up with in Batman Forever. For a nearly 3-hour long movie, the movie is surprisingly well paced. I mean, all the story beats hit at the right place. Really, the only bad parts about the pacing of the movie is just towards the middle it felt slower, and it kinda had multiple endings, and honestly, it kinda felt redundant. It's like, the movie's already ended, why do we gotta go on more? But despite these minor problems I have with the movie, overall the movie is just well done. It has amazing characters, amazing cinematography, and the plot is just, it's definitely a great take on the Batman, especially with all the different takes on the lore and stuff, like how Riddler looks like a serial killer for once and isn't wearing a ridiculous suit, and how Bruce Wayne's parents may not have actually been as clean, as good as they were portrayed by the media, and they may have some skeletons in the closet too, but I'll let you guys watch that movie to find out. All of the positives come together in a great Batman movie, especially a Batman movie where he's the main character and goes through an arc. I love Bruce Wayne's arc in this movie. He basically has to learn that yes, he's the guy who beats up the bad guys, but it's also important to save people and inspire hope. To become a hero rather than just a simple vigilante, because sure, it's okay to beat up the bad guys, but what's the point in doing that if you're not gonna save the people, especially if they can send the wrong messages and indirectly create more villains, which I can't wait to see in the future. Overall, The Batman is a good movie, 8 stars out of 10.